how we've always thought about David was, God came, he was like a genie in the bottle, and immediately all their worries are fixed once David comes into the picture. But what we need to concentrate on was, like last week, we talked about David was anointed. Samuel came, poured the oil over his head, and David was anointed. So as soon as he stepped on that battlefield, he was anointed and ready for battle. He wasn't the underdog. God was with him, and he was prepared. It probably helped a lot that he was a teenage boy and he thought he was 10 feet tall and bulletproof, but that, kind of comes with the territory. Let's see. So we can see how God all through the Old Testament, he has worked in people like that when they've been fearful, or they've been intimidated or whatever. There's several stories. We've talked about Joshua. He was walking around the walls of Jericho. That everybody on the wall was tormenting him and making fun of him, but he knew that God was with him and God was walking beside him, and when God said the word, then the walls were going to fall down. We also see that let's see. Samson defeated the Philistines by pulling he let a woman lead him astray, and when it was all said and done, he found God again, and he pulled the whole building down on top of the people that had held him captive. And so now we see a giant doing the same thing to the Israeli people. But the Lord is in all of those stories. He has gone before everyone in the Old Testament, New Testament, and current times. And he's here, but we don't often hear him because we're so inundated with noise, and, we're so busy. We'll just throw up a quick prayer, be with me, Father, and just kind of rattle it off. We do the same thing over and over and over, and we finish, we move on with our day. But we don't give God the time to talk to us. David had actually been out in the wilderness with the sheep. He had allowed God to talk to him. And we need to have that same relationship. Relationships are two-way streets. We need to talk, be quiet. Someone else will talk. Not always do we. Sometimes we just talk and talk and talk, and we never give someone else an opportunity. And that's what the Lord wants from us. And so now we're going to kind of look at the different components of what David had. It's obvious he had the pebbles. In fact, I read a really funny story. It's kind of funny, kind of weird. But nowadays, when they take them if you go on a tour to Israel, you can actually go to where where Goliath and David fought. It's in between two mountains. You can go there. And they have had so many people pick up the rocks that there aren't any rocks there now at all. So every night when it gets dark, the Israeli people bring a load of rocks in, and they drop the rocks because everybody wants a rock from where David defeated Goliath. And I thought, that's funny. How ironic. They've decimated the ground, and now there aren't any rocks in the desert. So that's... So the pebbles and the slingshot, I think those teach us to trust what limited resources we have. Sometimes we don't have a bunch of resources. We, a rock and a slingshot, it's not like he had a gun. Of course, they didn't have guns back then. But so we need to be intentional about developing our spiritual skills, because David had spiritual skills. He had strength. He was amazingly courageous in his faith. And he didn't care that he only had a rock and a slingshot. I did read, though, I found this kind of interesting. When that slingshot and the pebble hit Goliath in the head, that thing was traveling 76 miles an hour. That is really fast to be conked in the head with a rock. So now you know why he just took a tumble. They wanted David to put on the armor of Saul, and he couldn't even walk in it because it was 150 pounds. But God teaches us we don't really need that armor, and David was a witness to that. We need to use our spiritual tactics. We need to look at what God gave us And what God gave David in that time was he was keeping him out of reach. I mean, a 9-foot giant probably has a 9 or an 18-foot wingspan. Don't get within arm's reach. And I think, we don't need to get within arm's reach of Satan. I mean, Satan will drag us down every single time. And we need to just be willing to stay out of reach. Then you kind of wonder, I got to reading about that, and so there's really 4 things that we can take away from this story, and it was that David used training, tools, tactics, and trust. First off, the training that he did, David had already done the hard work. He had been protecting his sheep forever with a slingshot and a rock, and so he was already prepared for battle, and he was also anointed. He knew that God was going to take care of it from the get-go. And then the tools were obviously the rock, but our tools are to read in the Word. We are to be prayed up. We are to be ready for battle and spiritual warfare, because this whole world's full of evil anymore, and we need to be ready to fight at a minute's notice. God gave David tools, obviously, and he was a fighting machine, but we also have tools, and by doing Bible studies, having friends that lift you up, those are our tools. They're what's going to give us courage and the skills that we're going to need to fight the good fight. And the tactics that David used was to stay out of the reach of the enemy. These are probably things that I need to know, but I love sweets, so I probably need to keep my butt out of the bakery that's in town, and in Perry or Stillwater. They have a really good one. Ask me where it is, and I'll tell you. But I need to stay out of those places. If I have an alcohol problem, I shouldn't go to the bar. I know I can't handle it. We got to do. We got to be prayed up. We've got to be logical about our tactics, and we need to learn it. To trust. When God tells us to do something, we need to learn to trust what he tells us. And he will give us courage. He will have us our victory, because the battle is the Lord's. It's not ours. He's using us to fight the battle. We're instruments. We're vessels. We're just here to worship him and to fight the battles on earth for him and to be his hands and feet. And that's really what I really hope that we get out of our revival. We are God's hands and feet right here, and we need to just be ready to march out at a moment's notice and spread the love. And we've got to trust. The battle is the Lord's. So let's not confuse fighting our personal giants with fighting God's enemies. Let's fight God's enemies. Let's fight for God's honor. Let's train hard. Let's be skilled with spiritual tools and wise with our tactics. Let's trust God that when we fight for the Lord in the Lord's name, depending on him, the victory will be his and the glory will be his also. And that's what I had for y'all today. Thank you for joining us online, and we look forward to